All right. Hello, everyone. I am J.S. Garrett, and this is the first interview in a new interview series that I'm going to be conducting that is dedicated to discovering new innovative techniques in the occult practices. Now, I have a very special guest with me today, Mr. Jim Girouard. How are you doing, Jim?
Good, thanks.
All right. Excellent. Glad to have you. Now, you got in touch with me a few weeks ago, and you told me about a new system of divination that you had discovered or created. It sounds very interesting. It sounds different than anything that I've come across before. And I just wanted to jump on here and talk with you a little bit about that and let you explain how you discovered this and the working mechanics behind the system.
Okay, I got the idea from the Bible Code. And the Bible Code was a collection of thousands of letters from different books in the Bible. And what they did was they ran a computer program and they would scan through the letters after asking a question. And they got all kinds of answers, and I got predictions, and it became a pretty big sensation. And then this group came along who was trying to debunk it and trying to prove that it was a hoax. So what they did was they ran the letters of the book Moby Dick, and they asked questions and they got predictions and answers, just like the Bible Code. So the idea that I got from that video was that they didn't prove that the Bible Code was a hoax. What they proved was that if you had access to thousands of letters, then you could ask questions and get answers. So then I thought, if I could just get the letters for myself, that would be awesome, because then I could develop a system, and then I could teach that system to other people, and they wouldn't have to buy a CD and run the CD into the computer, which I did, and it cost about $74 at the time. I wound up throwing that CD in the trash because the CD doesn't translate Hebrew into English. And, I don't know a word of Hebrew. So, out of my experience in dealing with the Bible Code, I came up with this idea of using regular dice. So I went and got 5 regular dice, and I worked out a code, number letter code, and added A, B, C, D, which made it 30, because with 5 dice, which is 6-sided, there's 30. So I had to add 4 letters to the 26-letter alphabet. So I would throw the 5 dice like 18, maybe 20 times, and then have to decode the numbers into letters, and then decode the letters into words, and then form sentences. So it was kind of a really long process, but then I found out about boggle dice. I was actually looking at Scrabble, but he had a boggle game. And boggle game had 16 dice that had letters already on them. So, I was like in seventh heaven. I mean, I didn't have to throw the regular dice and then decode numbers into letters, and that was really time consuming. So now I had 16 dice that had letters on them. So I would throw the 16 dice 6 times and get roughly almost the same amount of what I'm doing now, which is I'm throwing 26 dice 5 times, and I get 130 letters. And I'm using Campbell's alphabet dice, and I get them from a place called puzzlewarehouse.com. They're only about $13. You get 36 dice. You only have to use 26. And then the people that want to learn this system, they buy the Campbell's alphabet dice, and they do the dice throws at home. They send me the letters, I decode the letters, and I send them the reading.
Okay. Well, yeah, that sounds pretty elaborate there, and it sounds like you've started to develop some techniques to simplify that a little bit, because that does does sound like quite a bit of work to translate numbers into letters. So yeah, I would say that that sounds very interesting. So let me ask you, whenever you're doing one of these readings, is there any type of special, like, ritual type practice or anything that you have to perform before doing a reading, or do you just go straight into the reading, ask a question, and then roll the dice and record the information?
The addition of something ritualistic would be helpful. I think it depends on the person. Like if somebody was inclined to do like a ritualistic type of thing, during or before the reading, that would probably enhance it. So something like that, I would encourage it. But what I usually do, like, I found out the secret of getting good readings is in the nature of the question. So in other words, let's say, some guy is interested in some girl. So, he throws the dice and his question is, am I going to get the girl? Well, the reading is going to say, he wants to know if he's going to get the girl. Which, it's not going to tell you anything. But in a case like that, what you can do is you can rephrase the question, and you can rephrase it to something like, am I in a position to receive love and romance? That changes the whole dynamic of the reading, because now what you're doing is you're sort of expanding the question to a much wider perspective. Or if somebody wants wealth, you don't want to ask a question like, am I going to win the lottery? Because, you're addressing your subconscious and you're addressing your higher self. Your higher self really doesn't understand what it means to win, or to win a lottery, or to get. Your subconscious doesn't understand that kind of thinking. And those thoughts are created in the mind, in the awake state. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to bypass the awake state. And the best thing to do is just throw the dice, don't ask a question, or ask a question like, what do I need to know next?
Okay.
And whatever you need to know next will be written out. Let me explain it this way. I think this is the best way to explain it. Oftentimes you hear about mental prisons, okay? And the whole idea about being in a mental prison is to find out how to escape out of the mental prison. So the idea that I'm putting forth with my method is to create a mental prison. And what I mean by that is a lot of the mental prisons that you've been exposed to come from the conditioning from your parents, from authorities, from teachers, from television. All of these external sources create a blueprint of mental prison, which comes from the outside and comes into you. Okay, so you can escape those mental prisons, okay? But it's very difficult because you didn't create them. Okay, so when you're doing a reading, what you're actually doing is you're creating a mental prison that you yourself created. Okay? It's your blueprint. It's your mental prison that you yourself made, created with your thoughts and your desire and your will. So now you have an advantage because you can escape out of that mental prison very quickly and very easily because you created it.
That's an interesting concept. Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I mean, we are indoctrinated from birth, through television, through school, through religious teachings. I mean, it's in every aspect of our lives, that puts us in this mind prison, and that is extremely hard for people to break out of because it becomes such a part of you from such a young age. So yeah, that's a really interesting concept, creating the prison yourself so that you in turn have the key to get out of that prison. That's yeah, that's something I haven't really heard anyone talk about before. So I guess my next question is, how do you decode the messages? Like, I understand you ask the question, you roll the dice multiple times and record each letter that comes up on the dice. So you would be dealing with a piece of paper full of jumbled up letters at the end of the reading, correct?
Right.
All right. So do you have a like a mathematical equation or a set system for decoding those messages?
I just wrote 4 chapters on how to do that. And the instructions are actually shortcuts. I think the best way to describe it to you, because I know that you're a magician, is that the best way to get the words is by gazing at the letters in the same way that you would gaze in the crystal ball. So what happens when you gaze is that your vision becomes a little blurry. I want to tell you an example of that from a movie called Mercury Rising. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's like a Bruce Willis.
Yeah, I watched that a really long time ago. Um, I'm not sure if I remember the entire movie, but I do remember seeing that. So yeah.
Okay, there's a 9-year-old boy. His parents were murdered in the movie, and Bruce Willis sort of took him under his wing and started taking care of him, and then realized that this boy was like super autistic. Okay, and he was being contacted by these guys that found out that the boy was decoding all of these encrypted messages that were in magazines, and they did it thinking nobody could encrypt it and decode it.
Right.
So because this kid was super autistic, he would just look at it and tell you what it said. Okay. Now the message that they were trying to get across in this movie is what I'm telling you right now. That when he looked at those encrypted letters, he wasn't reading it. He could see it. You get the picture?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's almost like as you're staring at this paper, you go into a trance-like state, and your mind sort of decodes it for you, is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that with the instructions you've created, that anyone could pick up this system and see results from that?
Yes. Let me tell you what happened. Like, I've been doing this for about 9 years now. And there was a reason why I didn't write out the instructions with the shortcuts. And it was because the problem with typing and how much time it takes to type things out, which I didn't want to go through all that typing and all that time. So I would suggest to people that they call me on Skype. Like, they get the dice, they do the letters, they send me the letters, I send them the reading, then we talk on Skype. And if they have questions, I can explain it on Skype. And it just, like in a minute, I can explain something that'll take me a half hour to type out.
Gotcha.
Okay, but that wasn't a good idea, because what people really want is they want a book of instructions, and they want to follow the instructions and do it at home by themselves and not have to call somebody. See what I mean? So
Yeah,
now this is much better because I'm writing the instructions out in the form of a book. So now they can get the book, they can follow the instructions, and maybe once in a while they can call me or we can talk on Skype and I can answer some questions. So that's why I'm writing the book now, because I realized, we're kind of like in a technology age now where, people don't interact as much, and they'd rather have the book, or they'd rather read it online, or do a Google search or something like that. But the interaction part is sort of, it's almost completely gone. People are
yeah.
all up in their text messages and their video games and computers and on and on and on.
Yeah, yeah, that's It's refreshing to talk to someone who encourages people to work together and interact, because we don't see much of that in this day and age, for sure. So, I mean, if people want to get in touch with you in order to learn about this system, I mean, should they contact you via email or Facebook? How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, they can find me on Facebook, and Girouard is spelled Girouard, and they're going to see the artwork like you see here, and write-ups and readings, and different things that I do.
Okay, excellent. So, have you been able to use this system to predict future events at all?
I don't use it to predict the future, but there is something that happens when I do a reading. There are predictions that come in, okay? But I never ask about the future. But these predictions of the future come in on their own. And I've had about a dozen earthquake predictions that all came out 100% accurate. Where it happened, the event, the earthquake, what day it happened, 4.5 on the Richter scale. Everything came out 100%.
Wow.
In fact, there was just one time where I got a reading. It said Florida next week, which was a Wednesday, earthquake. So I had, three things: the day, the place, and earthquake. Okay, so a week later, I was like glued to my television, watching the 6 o'clock news, waiting for them to say there was going to be an earthquake. Sure enough, the guy says there was an earthquake today, 4.5 on the Richter scale in Ecuador. So I thought that was pretty good. I got one wrong. Okay, I,
Well,
I got I got Florida instead of Ecuador. But what happened was I pulled up the reading and I re-decoded it a second time, and I found Ecuador.
very cool. Well, yeah, that sounds really interesting, because then you're really getting into, when it comes to predicting things like that, like what do you think this is tapping into? Do you think it's some type of universal divine consciousness that this information is coming from? Do you think it's coming from spirits or something like that? I mean, what do you think this is tapping into?
Well, you're tapping into your higher self and your subconscious. But your higher self and your subconscious is intricately interwoven with these oceanic currents of energy where, you could call it the spirit world, or you could call it entities or deities. Um, this method, I think of it as being something like a cosmic telephone, where you can just sort of dial up any kingdom that's out there: extraterrestrials, angels, demons, spirits, leprechauns, elementals, fairies, deceased people, Nostradamus, Edgar Casey. You can communicate with the future,
Wow,
and and you get ancient memories. Your ancient memories come through, and not only that, but you get a magical name in the reading. And on
a
top of
magical name, as in one's true name, is what you're saying.
right, like for example, the magical name that I use is the Egyptian scryer of magical destiny.
Wow, that's pretty cool. You got that from a reading.
Yes. So what I'm saying is, uh, you're going to get your ancient memories, past lives, ancient memories. That's going to come through. You're going to get your magical name, and it's going to be written out. Your name is going to be written out in the reading.
Very
Okay.
interesting.
Okay. So you know that this reading is for you because your name is written out in the reading. And not only that, but once you get to dice and you start doing these readings yourself, that the word combinations spell out the kind of expressions that you use when you talk to people.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, in other words, it's animated. All right, well, let me compare it to I Ching and tarot cards. The I Ching is probably the most widely used and the most popular, okay? But the tarot card is fixed. In other words, magician means magic. The death card means end. You know, Pentacles 10 means something. Each card means something, okay? So each one of those cards is in a fixed position. So when you do a tarot card reading, you look up in a booklet. You know, you go out and you buy this tarot card deck, $15 at Barnes and Noble, and you know, within a half an hour, you've done a reading and you get a booklet, and you can look it up. So you know, we've sort of trivialized divination by doing this and putting it on the market and doing it so that people, like in an afternoon, they're doing what they think is divination, okay? But the way that my method is different is that the letters are not fixed. So in other words, you have 26 letters in your hand and you throw them. And once you throw them, you can't influence the way that those letters fall.
Right.
So that's what I mean with the letters are not fixed. They're fluid. Okay? So the reading that you get comes in the form of sentences that pertain exactly and precisely to you as a person.
That's very cool. And, you know, that's what I like about this concept, you know, is because, you know, with other methods of divination, it's very open to different interpretations, you know, like tarot cards, they have assigned meanings, but, you know, whenever you're looking at a spread and the order that that's spread out, you know, the idea is that you tap into this divination state of mind and allow the cards to speak to you. And two different practitioners might get two totally different readings from the same spread, which I like the fact that this actually spells it out for you because it's a lot less open to interpretation and getting direct messages.
Right.
So when you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, we discussed the possibilities of using this divination technique of yours in evocation to actually summon a spirit and receive messages directly from that spirit. And you attempted this with Belial, correct?
Yes.
And how did that go? Like, how was that different from a typical reading, you know, as opposed to utilizing that with evocation?
I think this is something that is going to have to be tweaked and perfected, you know, because I only did it once. And, you know, I followed the instructions that you gave me. You know, I got the blood meal and the candles. I got everything that you suggested. And I did it and I filmed it. But what I wanted to tell you about that is we're going to do this again in a more professional manner. And we're going to film it then.
Okay.
So, you know, we're going to get into this a little bit deeper because I thought this was a really good idea, you know, combining divination with an evocation. And I'd never done it before, never thought about it before, but I tried it.
Yeah, I think that that can be used in evocation. That would be extremely helpful to magicians out there, because I think that the communication aspect is the thing that we all struggle with the most. Now, some magicians can evoke a spirit and sit there and channel word for word what the spirit is saying, whereas most people tend to struggle in that area. So if they had a tool like this where they could simply evoke the spirit and roll the dice and let the dice spell out exactly what the spirit is saying to them, then I think that would be highly beneficial for people in their magical practice. And so I'm really interested to experiment further with this. I'm actually gonna be ordering a set of these dice myself and seeing what I can come up with in doing that. So yeah, I look forward to seeing what this brings forth and further experimentation with different aspects in magic and the occult, because this is really unlike anything else out there that I've heard of in regards to divination practice. It's very new, it's very innovative, and I guess my next question would be how did you discover this? Like, did you create this? I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, you know, that you based it off the Bible code, but did this idea just kind of come to you, or what? I mean, how did you start putting this together?
Okay. The way I got the idea, or the inspiration, I should say, was I was living in a Hare Krishna temple, and I was answering the door. And a lot of the people that came to the temple would tell me a lot of the same thing, which was, I come to the temple for philosophy, but I don't have personal connection with the devotees in the temple. So I go see the hugging saint, Amma. So I really got a revelation from that, because I realized that the devotees that were living in the temple were very busy with a schedule, and they weren't really giving their undivided attention to the people who are coming to the temple, okay? So then a few days later, I went up to the next floor and lined up all the way across the hallway with all the devotees that lived in the temple waiting for a palm reading, okay? I really got a revelation from seeing that, because then I started thinking, okay, if this Hare Krishna lifestyle is the perfect lifestyle, why are they lining up to get a palm reading? Okay, so then I thought to myself, like, each person has a contract with the Godhead. Like, before you're born, you come in with a contract, okay? But you don't know exactly what that contract looks like. But on your hand, there's a bunch of lines, and those lines act as a blueprint. That blueprint on your hand is the blueprint or the contract you have with the Godhead. Okay? So that's how I got the idea, because with letters and words and sentences, your contract with the Godhead is spelled out.
Very cool.
You can read it.
I like it, man. I like it. Well, yeah, I think you've stumbled onto something pretty awesome here. I think people are going to have a great reaction to this, and I'm looking forward to working with you further in the future as far as developing this system and incorporating it into occult practices. And I think that once once your instruction book is out, I think this is really going to blow up for you. And I imagine that you'll probably have an influx of people hitting you up for Skype consultations on this too. So,
well, I really appreciate the fact that you're helping me launch this idea out there to, magicians and sorcerers, anybody really, left hand path, right hand path, middle path, anybody that's interested,
yeah, well, I don't think that I think you'll get a great reaction to it too, because it's not specific to any one certain path. I mean, it's something that really, it sounds like anybody could pick this up and work with it. Just right off the bat. They don't necessarily need to be a magician or any type of practitioner. I mean, it could be a regular person, and it doesn't really seem to be rooted in any religious philosophies or anything like that. So I don't think there will be a lot of negative stigma around it either. I mean, it seems like you're just tapping into the higher self and the divine consciousness and letting the information come through. So yeah, I see this. I see people having a great reaction to this. I think it's going to be big. So yeah, I applaud you for discovering this and bringing this information forth, and definitely encourage you to finish writing your instruction manual and continue to find ways to incorporate this into other practices like evocation, because I think that's going to be huge as well. So, absolutely.
Okay, I just sent you an email of a reading I did this morning that has your name in it.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, this is going to be interesting. It had my name in it this time, huh?
yeah.
Very.
So, if you want to check it out, it also has Draconis in it,
Okay.
and it has the name Rosmarinus, which is Rosemary Stellic, which is something else I want to tell you about. Um, I did a reading, which I call a harmonic reading. And a harmonic reading is when one person's name is in the reading and then another person's name. If there's two names, it's a harmonic. And some readings have three or four. It's not as common, but it happens. Okay, so Orly Forth.
Yeah, she just made a painting for me. Beautiful, beautiful artwork. Very talented sorceress.
Yeah,
I'll actually be having her on for an interview here very soon.
yeah, she's a very nice girl. I really like the way that she describes her personal experiences and sort of walks you through it. Okay, for some reason, I get a lot of readings on her. Her energy is just something I tune into her a lot. Okay, so in this reading, I find Orly Forth, and then I find Rosemary Stellic. She's a martial artist in Toronto. And then I find this word Kara with a K, K-A-R-A. So I write to Orly and I say to her, "Who's Kara?" And she writes back and says, "It's Clara." Okay, so I get the reading out again, I decode it a second time, and I find the letter L next to the letter K.
Very cool.
Okay, so now Clara with a K is acceptable because the pronunciation is the same.
Right.
Okay? So now I found out that Clara's last name is Blackwood, and then I find Blackwood in the reading. Okay, so now I have Holy Forth, Rosemary Stellic, Clara Blackwood, and then I get contacted by Derek Roskirth, who invites me on his program for an interview, and then I go back and decode it again, and his name is in there, spelled out letter for letter, exactly the way he spells it.
Wow. It's very cool, dude. That's yeah, that's interesting, and that raises damn, we could sit here and talk about this all day, I think. I know we're about to run out of time here, so we're gonna have to wrap this up here in just a minute. Is there anything else that you want to cover real quick?
Yeah, I wanted to tell you what Curtis told me, Curtis Joseph.
Okay.
He was telepathically contacted by Thoth, and Thoth told him instructions on how to make divination dice with semi-transparent green gemstones, 10-sided, with both Phoenician letters and English letters, and also said that this divination method with the dice and the green gemstones is a direct link to the Emerald Tablets.
Wow. That's yeah, that's pretty heavy, dude. That's really heavy. Well, yeah, I'll actually be talking to Curtis here this afternoon, so we'll definitely dig into that. And yeah, I'll probably have you back on here in a few weeks, and we'll talk about this some more. I know we've got some interesting experiments to incorporate this system into. So yeah, this won't be the last time you guys hear from Mr. Girouard. And yeah, I want to thank you for coming on with me today, and I want to thank you for reaching out to me and telling me about this new technique. I think it's going to be huge, man. So thank you very much. Yeah, we're oh wow, yeah, our connection's getting a little hammered here. So yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. I appreciate you coming on with me, Jim, and we'll talk again soon.
All right.
right.